Welcome to the Teapot Read. I'm the Teapot. My name's Sam. This is what I'm currently reading, and since you can't tell because I have it covered up, it's Crescent City Book 2. And I'm so happy to see you today. Welcome, 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 welcome back. Welcome here if this is your first time visiting. Hi. Today, very excited, we get to talk about Gallant by v.e.schwab. So, Gallant comes out March 1st of 2022. I was very lucky to receive a copy through work. I didn't actually write out to this, it just showed up at work. I work at a bookstore, so we get early copies, but I do want to say thank you Green Willow Books and HarperCollins for allowing this to be sent to my work so that I could read it and review it here and definitely talk it up. I am going to be hand selling this as much as I can because I did really enjoy it. Is that a little bit of a spoiler? Also, I do have notes down here, so if I'm glancing down, I'm looking at my notes. I love reviewing books. I don't do it a lot because as much as I love it, I find it very hard to vocalize my thoughts. I'm much better at writing them down. So I'm trying today to do the review with actually a little teleprompter app. So we're gonna see how that works out, but I wanted to make sure I said everything I wanted to say. This will be a spoiler-free review. So please, if you're going to comment anything about the book, keep it spoiler-free. I know the typical elevator pitch for this book is The Secret Garden meets Crimson Peak, but I have never seen Crimson Peak. I'm not even 100% sure what it's about. So I have been telling people that it is The Secret Garden, but with a haunted house, which I think might be the same thing. But again, I haven't seen Crimson Peak, so I don't actually know how that stacks up. But Secret Garden with a haunted house is a really good description for this book. Gallant was fun and quick, and it reminded me why I like YA books, but it also reminded me why v.e.schwab's YA books are not my favorite. It's fun. There's no romance, which I think is great because the book really does harp on themes of family. It doesn't always succeed where it thinks it is, but it does really focus on that, and I did enjoy that because I don't think you see a lot of YA paranormal stories that are devoid of romance. Like, there's no romance. It's not a point at all in this book. I do think there's a point early on that kind of hints that Olivia might be ace, but there wasn't anything that like confirmed it, and it didn't keep coming up. What's it about though? It is about Olivia Pryor, who is an orphan. She grew up at a school/orphanage called Maryland's that is for all girls. And then one day she receives a letter from her uncle that she didn't even know she had. She thought she had no family, and the uncle is like, I want to take you home to Gallant. And that sounds great and all, but her mother, she has a diary of her mother's, and her mother was very insistent that Olivia never go to Gallant if she wants to be safe. Olivia goes to Gallant nonetheless because she wants to meet her family. She wants to meet this uncle, and when she gets there, it is not the warm welcome she wanted or expected. Turns out her uncle has been dead, and her only other living family member is a cousin named Matthew, who very clearly is like, you need to leave. You cannot be here. There are two other people living in the house. There's Hannah, the housekeeper, and Edgar, the groundskeeper, I believe is his position. Gallant is this beautiful old house, but it's also kind of spooky. And there are these gates. And on the other side of these gates in the wall is another Gallant and another world. And at this Gallant, there is someone living there called the master of the house. And he is committed to leaving his Gallant and coming to Olivia's, and Olivia is committed to protecting her Gallant until living there because that is her home. That is where she belongs. Even though literally everyone is telling her, don't. I liked it. I liked that plot. I liked a lot about the book. I just thought that based on everything that I have read of v.e.schwab, which I haven't read all of her books. I have read The Archived and The Unbound. I have read Addie LaRue. I have read A Darker Shade of Magic like 3 times. I like that book a lot. And I have read Vicious. So I've started her series for the most part, but I haven't like finished any of them. And of them, my favorite was probably Vicious, and then probably A Darker Shade of Magic, and then probably Addie, if we're being honest. And I just wasn't super taken by The Archived or The Unbound. And I even read those when I was more the age that they were targeted at. I do like Gallant more. It's clearly shown she's grown. Hi, dear puppy. It's clearly shown that she's grown as a writer, but having seen what she's been able to do in other books like Addie, this was a little bit of a disappointment because even though it's a YA and a very different audience than Addie, it was a lot weaker in some ways that were disappointing to me. So let's talk about it. First of all, the aesthetic and the atmosphere of this book were so on point. I loved it. In particularly, I loved the ghouls. So Olivia, her entire life, has been able to see these ghouls, the spirits of the dead, that which remains, and the way they're described is so neat. Basically, you see like a piece of them. So it's like part of a face, maybe just like the chin and an ear and then like an elbow. Like it gives this vibe of almost like watery, half-formed spirits. And then the way they appear in like the other Gallant is a little different, but I'm not going to spoil that because I did enjoy that a lot as well. But just the way the ghouls appeared, they were creepy and morbid and a little whimsical in the way that it worked. I thought it was very cool. I also love the description of Gallant, our world Gallant, or Olivia world's Gallant, and Master of the House's world Gallant. They are similar and different, and they really do work like mirrors. I thought that was really cool. There were some things that were left unexplained. Like, I can piece together why this might be happening, but it just felt like it was more important when it was put out. There are these like gray tendrils growing through the garden, and it seems like it'll be more important than it is, and there's not like a lot of follow-up. That happened a couple times with a couple different things in this book, which was disappointing. Chekhov's gun is a popular, well-known writing thing. If the gun is there in the first act, it will be used by the end of the third act. And there were things that were put out in maybe not the first act, but let's say the second act of this book that were just not really developed or used. Additionally, as interesting and cool as the house was, and I did enjoy following Olivia as she wandered it, the garden is fairly early on set to be important, and it is thematic throughout. There's important things that happen in the garden. It's not, it's not actually a retelling of the secret garden, so it's not like the garden's the central point or anything, but it's laid out more important than the time and attention it's given. So that was also a little disappointing. As for Olivia herself, she was just pretty meh most of the time for me. I know it's sort of a personal opinion about why she was meh. She was just very much the sort of character that the reader can imprint upon more than defines herself. And I don't like to read characters like that as much. I know they appear more in YA than they do adult fiction or even middle grade fiction. But I don't know. I don't like that sort of character that's a blank slate that you can imprint upon. Or if I do, it's so very rare. I like to have a character that defines herself and that you can still connect with and maybe see yourself in, but you're not like putting yourself in her shoes. Or if you do, it's not because she's built to be this empty vessel for you to fill. It's because you just happen to have that strong of a connection with the character, or the world building is so great. There have definitely been books where I'm like, I feel like I'm part of this world. Like when I read Mistborn, a long time ago now, when I read Mistborn, I would like wake up from the most realistic seeming dreams that I was an Allomancer. And when I was reading, it felt like it was actually happening around me and to me sometimes. That being said, characters like Vin and Kelsier and what was his name? Elend and Elend are realistic characters that have a lot of depth and growth and motivation to them. I didn't imprint on them because they were empty vessels. I imprinted on them because I was so close to the character that had been built up. And Olivia is much closer to that empty vessel, blank slate sort of character that you kind of have to imprint on to give her a lot of personality. She did have personality. I'm not going to say she didn't. She was definitely the most well-rounded character for me, and I'll talk about side characters in a couple minutes. And there were a lot of small moments that made me really appreciate her as a character. She is mute. This doesn't get a lot of billing, but she is a mute character, which is interesting. I don't know if I've ever seen on page a character who is mute but not deaf. I don't think so. So that was nice. I'm sure there are more characters out there. I thought it was a nice touch, and I definitely think it connected to Olivia's past in a really unique way without being like directly causal effect sort of situation, which I think is important because disabilities should not be because the plot needs it to be. It should just be a part of the character. Does that make sense? So that was good. That was fine. But there were small moments, often because she couldn't communicate verbally, that really made her stand out. There's this moment pretty early on where she feels like she's being ignored, so she just like breaks a vase. And one of my favorite moments ever. There's also a moment with a piano that her and Matthew share, and I thought that was another really great scene. So there are a lot of these little scenes that really define Olivia, but in between these scenes, she was just so empty for me. So yeah, most of the time, just very meh for me. And yeah, like I said, I'll talk about the side characters in a minute. Another meh thing was the beginning of the novel. It was so rough. It was so hard for me to get through the beginning. It's boring, it's predictable, and it's longer than it needs to be. Part 1 is set at Maryland's, which is the school, and everything at Maryland's could have been pushed into one chapter, and I think that would have been more than enough information about Olivia's time at Maryland's. She does a lot of reflecting on it as it is throughout the rest of the book, so why did we have to see all of these scenes that really aren't that important in the novel? Like, they are important to her as a character and her trauma, but they're not plot-wise important in the novel. So it's just frustrating, and it was boring and slow. It took about until the piano scene that I just mentioned for the book to really find its feet and its legs. Up, like, between arriving at Gallant and to the piano scene, it's still interesting, it's still good, I was engaged, but at that point, it finds its legs and it just takes off. And then all this stuff with the other Gallant is phenomenal, amazing. I loved all of that. I thought it was really just 10 out of 10, amazing. It didn't have too much or too little of that. It had the amount of time over there that it needed. The other major problem I have with the structure, though, is the ending. There's, like I said, this is spoiler free, but there is a decision made for one of the characters by the author. So something happens to one of the characters that I understand why it happened. It does match thematically with the book and with the character, but it was so predictable. It was so expected. It would have been so much more interesting and exciting and daring for the book to have gone in a different direction with this character. And I think it still would have made sense for the character and for the plot and for the trajectory of the book. But it just ends on such a note that you're like, I guess that's it. The book, from a writing point of view, I think the book would have had a more impactful ending if it chose to do something else with this character and chose to go in the way that wasn't predictable. We should also talk about the design of the book. So the US edition is square, which is really neat, and it's going to be like that in the finished copy as well. And you can actually see, I think you can see that there are some pages that are darker than others. And there's also art. So I loved the art. It was gorgeous art, absolutely beautiful, stunning. And the art is actually repeated several times throughout the book. The part in the middle that, okay, hold on. The pages in the middle that are stained a little darker are actually parts of Olivia's mother's diary, which we actually get to see firsthand. So the novel spends a lot of time repeating parts from this diary and showing us the same art again and again. It's kind of spread out throughout, but we do see the same pieces repeated. Normally, this sort of thing would really grate me. The repetition of both the art, well, not so much the art, but the repetition of Olivia telling us these passages and these pieces from her mother's diary would really grate on me. I actually really enjoyed it. So Olivia has these basically memorized and carved into her heart, and they're so important for her. And as the reader, it's one thing to like hear that, but by being able to see these pieces repeated again and again, by getting this art again and again, which is almost like subconscious because you're reading a book, so you're seeing the thing, but you're focused on the words more than the art. So it's a little subconscious, I think. This happening, it just showed me as the reader, it made me feel the weight of these words and these pictures for Olivia. And I felt almost like I was memorizing them and learning them on my own heart. So I really liked that. I thought that was really smart. I am a sucker for art in a book. I've never had a book repeat art quite like this. I really loved that. I thought it was just so great. It was just a fantastic way to really get across the importance of these things for this character. But on to side characters. So they exist, barely. The strongest ones are the master of the house, who is definitely, we get enough about him that he's interesting and we get the idea of what he's about without knowing too much. So he's still like a mysterious character, which I loved. and Matthew, who's her cousin, and he's still kind of barely a character. He's enough of a character that he's very plot important, but he doesn't really go beyond what the plot needs us to know about him. Then we have Hannah and Edgar, the housekeeper and the groundskeeper. I thought they were really cute and sweet. We don't know that much about them. And as for all the characters at Maryland's, oh my god, my dog just discovered his reflection. He was playing and he saw his reflection in the mirror. Who is that, Tanky? Is that you? That was cute. As for the characters at Maryland's, we get a little bit of them, but they're so thin. They're not characters. They don't really exist. This book would put down a lot of characters to fill particular spots and holes. Hi, baby. I know. Can you not play with the squeaky right now? In general, the side characters felt less substantial than the ghouls. Although, I have considered maybe that is the point. I ended up giving this book 4.5 stars, more for the fact that I really enjoyed the writing and the aesthetic atmosphere of this book. It was so immersive. It really hit a little bit of my nostalgia because it did read younger on the YA scale. Schwab continues to prove how well she can build worlds, especially worlds like this. I just really wish she had taken the characters further, maybe cut out a little extra. I know it's YA and it kind of has to fall into YA conventions, but did it have to fall so rigidly into so many of them? Not to say that's bad, but I know she can do more because I've read her books where she does more. And yeah, they're for adults, but you can translate. There's so many good YA books doing different things. Why couldn't this be one of them? Anyways, 4.5 out of 5 stars, so pretty positive from me. For YA readers, I think it's definitely going to appeal more on the younger side of things. Just the vibe I get. So it's going to have a lot of crossover appeal to middle grade readers as well. As for adult readers, it's good. It's fun. It's quick. I really enjoyed it. I felt almost a little nostalgic while reading it. Like I said, Olivia, as much as she's not a super developed character, is still a really good character. And the world of Gallant is fantastic. Just do not expect another Addie LaRue out of this book. It's sort of very pretty, but it's nowhere near a favorite. So that's it for me. That is my entire thoughts on Gallant. Thank you once again, Harper. Yeah, Harper Collins, for sending this book to my work so that I could pick it up. But thank you for making it available. I'm really glad I got to read it early. I read it in like 6 days, which is quicker than I tend to read books. So that was really pleasant. I felt super, super successful while reading it. And thank you to the viewers for sticking with me and hearing my thoughts on this book. I would like to hear your thoughts if you've read this book, because I liked it, but it's not a favorite, and I'd like to talk about it more. If you're new here and you liked this content and you want to see more content like this, definitely consider subscribing. I would really appreciate it. And if you're already a subscriber, thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you. It means the world to me to know that there is someone out there actually interested in what I have to say and actually listening to me. Although if you're only subscribed for Tank, I also 100% get it. Because he's my whole world. He's found his reflection again. If you are somewhere cold, I hope you're staying warm. If you are somewhere warm, I hope you're staying comfortable. And most of all, I hope you're reading a great book. I'll see you guys next time.